Prince Harry nearly broke down in tears in a London courtroom, and the moment may go down as one of the most damaging public appearances of his life. As he gave evidence in his privacy lawsuit against the publisher of the Daily Mail and Mail on Sunday, the Duke of Sussex became visibly emotional, openly discussing what he described as the misery his wife, Meghan Markle, has endured. But what was supposed to be a powerful stand against the British press quickly unraveled into something far more chaotic and far more damaging. Before we get into the details, make sure you stay to the end of this breakdown, because what happened in that courtroom raises serious questions about credibility, strategy, and whether this case is already slipping out of Prince Harry's control. If you want continued updates on this trial and other major royal developments, this is the moment to subscribe and turn on notifications. This hearing took place on January 22, 2026, inside London's High Court. Prince Harry arrived believing this would be his defining moment, his chance to finally confront the tabloids he has blamed for years of personal pain. The lawsuit targets Associated Newspapers Limited, accusing the company of phone hacking and unlawful information gathering between 2001 and 2013. The financial stakes are enormous, with damages potentially reaching tens of millions of dollars. Harry is also the most high-profile figure among a group of claimants that includes Elton John and Elizabeth Hurley. On paper, this should have been a strong position. In reality, it became a courtroom spiral almost immediately. As soon as Harry took the witness stand, things began to feel off. Instead of calmly answering questions, he repeatedly challenged the lawyer questioning him. He debated. He pushed back. He became argumentative. The atmosphere in the courtroom shifted fast, and within a single morning session, the judge was forced to intervene not once, not twice, but 3 separate times. If you're finding this breakdown helpful so far, hit the like button. It helps more people see this analysis and keeps coverage like this going. Justice Matthew Nicklin, a veteran media law judge, initially tried to guide Harry gently. He explained that many litigants fall into the trap of arguing instead of answering and reminded Harry that it was his legal team's job, not his, to argue the case. The instruction was clear: respond to the questions directly and allow the lawyers to do their work. Harry did not stop. By the second interruption, the judge's patience was clearly thinning. By the third, the exchange turned firm and unmistakable. Harry began arguing over what qualifies as a legitimate journalistic source, essentially attempting to lecture a media law specialist inside his own courtroom. In a bench trial, where the judge alone decides the outcome, this was an extraordinary misstep. And that's what makes this moment so critical. There is no jury here. No public performance to win over. No emotional appeal that can tip the scales. There is one decision-maker, and Harry openly clashed with him multiple times in a single day. Legal observers inside the courtroom later described Harry as unsettled and visibly rattled. He appeared unprepared, defensive, and unable to fully ground himself in the witness box. That impression only intensified when it emerged that his testimony had been moved forward by a day after the defense shortened its opening arguments. The schedule change seemed to throw him completely off balance. If you want a deeper dive into courtroom strategy and why this timing mattered so much, comment Courtroom below. I'll cover it in a follow-up. Then came the emotional turning point. Harry's voice cracked as he told the court that the press had made his wife's life an absolute misery. He spoke about seeking nothing more than accountability and an apology. On the surface, it sounded heartfelt. But legally, it created a serious problem. This case focuses on articles published between 2001 and 2013. Prince Harry did not meet Meghan Markle until 2016. She is not mentioned in the articles under dispute. She has no direct legal connection to the claims being argued. And yet, she became central to his testimony. That disconnect did not go unnoticed. At the same time Harry was standing alone in a London courtroom, Meghan Markle was reportedly in Montecito, thousands of miles away, posting on social media. Images of their home and lifestyle appeared online during the same week he was giving what he described as the most important testimony of his life. The contrast was immediate, and the public reaction was brutal. If you think optics matter in cases like this, share this video, because this detail changed how many people viewed the entire trial. Things grew even more uncomfortable when Harry spoke about media intrusion and insisted he never believed his life should be treated as open season for commercialization. That statement collided head-on with reality. This is the same man who published a highly personal memoir detailing intimate family disputes, private text messages, drug use, and sexual experiences. He followed it with a global Netflix documentary and a primetime interview watched by millions. The contradiction was impossible to ignore. Observers and commentators were quick to point out that you cannot aggressively monetize your own private life and then argue that no one else has the right to report on it. That inconsistency hung over the courtroom like a fog, and it weakened his position with every passing exchange. If you're still watching, this next part is crucial, because it's where the case begins to fracture. The court then turned its attention to Chelsea Davy, Harry's former girlfriend. Several of the articles under dispute relate to her, and Harry admitted he had contacted her the night before his testimony to discuss events from years earlier. Chelsea has long stepped away from royal life, built a family, and maintained a private existence. Her reappearance in this legal battle raised eyebrows, particularly given the emotional tone Harry used when speaking about her. Public reaction was swift. Many questioned whether it was fair, or even appropriate, to pull someone who has deliberately avoided the spotlight back into a high-profile courtroom drama. Then came another blow, the resurfacing of the alleged Mr. Mischief Facebook account. The defense suggested Harry used the alias to communicate with journalists, including reporters from publications he now accuses of wrongdoing. Harry denied it, but the implication was clear: if proven, it would undermine his narrative of total media victimhood. And finally, the most alarming development of all. Reports began circulating that members of Harry's legal team were stepping back or considering withdrawing from the case entirely. In legal circles, this is a flashing red warning sign. Lawyers do not walk away mid-trial unless they believe the client's version of events is no longer sustainable or the evidentiary foundation has collapsed. This trial was meant to be Prince Harry's moment of vindication. Instead, it may be remembered as the day his case, and his credibility, began to unravel in real time. If you want continued updates as this story develops, make sure you subscribe, like this video, and share it with anyone following the royal saga. And let me know in the comments, was this a bad day for Prince Harry, or the beginning of the end for this case? Stay tuned. What happened next inside that courtroom is where this case truly crossed from uncomfortable into dangerous territory for Prince Harry. Because once the emotional cracks appeared, the legal foundation beneath him began to visibly crumble, and the defense wasted no time exploiting it. As cross-examination continued, the Daily Mail's legal team shifted gears. They stopped pressing emotionally charged questions and instead focused on something far more lethal in a courtroom: inconsistencies. Dates. Sources. Assumptions. And with every answer Harry gave, the gap between what he believed happened and what he could actually prove grew wider. If you're trying to understand why this moment matters so much, make sure you watch all the way through, because this is where the case stops being about tabloids and starts being about credibility. Over and over again, Harry was asked to explain how he knew specific information had been obtained illegally. Over and over again, his answers relied on belief rather than evidence. He said he felt certain the press must have hacked phones. He said he assumed information could only have come from private conversations. But when pressed on how he knew this, who hacked what, when, and through which method, his answers became vague. That distinction is fatal in a media law case. Belief is not proof. Suspicion is not evidence. And personal conviction does not meet the legal standard required to establish unlawful information gathering. The defense didn't need to accuse Harry of lying. They simply let the absence of hard facts speak for itself. If you've ever wondered how a strong-sounding case can quietly fall apart in court, this is exactly how it happens. Like this breakdown if you want more legal analysis explained in plain language. At several points, Harry acknowledged that he could not identify specific journalists who allegedly hacked phones. He could not pinpoint precise dates when illegal activity occurred. He could not explain how certain stories were sourced beyond his general belief that the press had it out for him. Each admission chipped away at the central claim of the lawsuit. And then the defense introduced a subtle but devastating argument. Much of the information in the disputed articles was already public. Public appearances. Official palace briefings. Well-known social connections. Widely reported events. The lawyers argued that none of this required hacking. If information is already circulating within social and institutional circles, journalists don't need to steal it. They simply need to report it. That point landed hard. Courtroom observers noted a shift in the judge's demeanor at this stage. He leaned in, not emotionally, but analytically. This was no longer about sympathy or personal history. It was about whether the claims could survive close legal inspection. And the defense, armed with documents and timelines, was steadily tightening the net. If you want updates the moment the judge delivers his ruling, subscribe now so you don't miss it. As the questioning continued, another pattern emerged. Harry repeatedly framed himself as powerless, overwhelmed by a hostile media machine. But the court kept circling back to a difficult reality: he is one of the most recognizable people on earth. With access, privilege, and influence that most claimants could never dream of. That contradiction mattered. The defense argued that Harry wasn't simply a passive victim of media intrusion, but an active participant in the media ecosystem. Someone who engaged with journalists when it suited him. Someone who benefited from coverage when it was favorable. Someone who used the press strategically, until he no longer liked the narrative. This argument gained traction when journalists named in the case pushed back through legal channels. One reporter denied Harry's characterization entirely, stating that he had invited her to social events during the very period he now describes as hostile. That detail didn't just challenge his account, it destabilized it. If you think this changes how the public sees the case, share this video. This is one of those moments that rewrites the narrative. Then came what many legal analysts described as the turning point of the day. Harry was questioned about the balance between the privileges of royal life and the scrutiny that comes with it. The implication was clear: extraordinary status comes with extraordinary exposure. That trade-off may be uncomfortable, but it is not unlawful. When Harry tried to push back on that idea, the judge intervened again, this time decisively. He reminded Harry that the court was not there to debate philosophy or fairness. It was there to determine legality. Whether laws had been broken. Whether evidence supported the claims. That line hit like a wall. Because throughout his testimony, Harry seemed to conflate emotional harm with legal wrongdoing. The court repeatedly pulled him back to specifics. Articles. Dates. Sources. Evidence. And each time, the gap between his lived experience and the legal threshold became more obvious. Meanwhile, whispers around the courtroom grew louder. Insiders reported that members of Harry's legal team appeared increasingly uneasy. Their body language shifted. Their interventions became more cautious. And behind the scenes, reports emerged that some advisors were distancing themselves from the case. That is never a good sign. When legal teams step back mid-trial, it usually means one of two things: either the evidence no longer supports the claims, or the client's instructions are becoming untenable. In either scenario, the implications are serious. If this case collapses, it won't be because the press won a public relations battle. It will be because the legal argument could not stand up under scrutiny. As the session drew to a close, the contrast between the two sides was undeniable. The defense remained calm, precise, and document-focused. Harry appeared emotionally drained, reactive, and increasingly boxed in by his own statements. Court watchers described him as stuck in a loop, returning again and again to broader grievances instead of addressing the narrow legal questions in front of him. And that's the core problem. This trial is not about whether Prince Harry feels wronged by the media. It's about whether Associated Newspapers Limited broke the law. Feelings don't decide cases. Evidence does. By the end of the day, one thing was clear: this was no longer a clean fight for justice. It was a high-risk gamble that may already be slipping out of Prince Harry's hands. If you want part 3 the moment new testimony drops, make sure you're subscribed, leave a comment with your thoughts, and share this with anyone following the case closely. Because this story is far from over, and the next phase could be even more explosive. As the alleged dossier narrative continued to ripple outward, analysts began situating it within a broader pattern that extended well beyond intelligence files or palace briefings. The controversy, they argued, could not be understood in isolation. It intersected with celebrity culture, media economics, philanthropy branding, and the evolving role of monarchy itself in the 21st century. To understand why this story refuses to fade, follow closely, because the context matters as much as the claims. Long before her relationship with Prince Harry, Meghan Markle had cultivated a public identity that blended ambition, activism, and aspirational lifestyle. Her now-defunct lifestyle platform, The TIG, regularly featured luxury travel, high-end fashion, wellness retreats, and global cuisine, content that critics later cited as evidence of early access to elite environments, while supporters framed it as savvy brand building in the influencer age. What is often overlooked is that the TIG emerged during a period when celebrity culture itself was undergoing transformation. Social capital became currency. Visibility became leverage. And proximity to power, political, cultural, or financial, was increasingly normalized as networking rather than privilege. If this framing changes how you see the story, share this thread, because it complicates easy conclusions. Prince Harry, for his part, was already a symbol of institutional tension long before Meghan entered his life. His military service, public struggles with grief, and vocal criticism of the press had positioned him as both asset and liability to the monarchy. Palace historians note that Harry represented a generational shift, a royal less inclined toward stoicism and more aligned with therapeutic openness and moral absolutism. That context matters because it shaped how warnings, if they occurred, were received. According to several royal biographers, Harry had grown distrustful of palace systems, viewing them as cold, archaic, and complicit in past harms, particularly in the treatment of his mother, Princess Diana. If you want the next section breaking down the Diana parallel and why it still governs palace decision-making, stay tuned. Meghan and Harry's early public popularity further complicated internal resistance. Their wedding in 2018 was framed globally as a symbol of modernization, biracial representation, American dynamism, and a softer royal image aligned with global humanitarian language. For a monarchy navigating Brexit-era uncertainty, this was not trivial. It was strategic value. This is where some analysts argue the institution itself became conflicted. Even if concerns existed privately, confronting them risked undermining a narrative the palace had already endorsed publicly. In institutional terms, momentum can override caution. If you've seen organizations double down instead of course correct, comment below, because this pattern is not unique to royalty. Following the Sussexes' departure from official duties, their post-royal trajectory added another layer. Multi-million-dollar media deals with streaming platforms, high-profile interviews, and tightly controlled storytelling reignited debates about authenticity versus monetization. Supporters argued the couple was reclaiming agency. Critics countered that the emphasis on grievance conflicted with claims of seeking privacy. Within this environment, renewed scrutiny of Meghan's pre-royal life took on amplified significance. Allegations that might once have remained fringe found new oxygen in a polarized media ecosystem primed for confirmation bias on all sides. Importantly, none of this required an intelligence dossier to function. The culture itself did the work. If you're still reading, follow now, because this convergence explains why resurfaced claims feel more volatile in 2026 than they did a decade earlier. Princess Anne's reported role, meanwhile, was interpreted by observers less as personal criticism and more as institutional accounting. Known throughout her life for rejecting celebrity excess, and has consistently distanced herself from media spectacle, philanthropy branding, and curated vulnerability. Her credibility, in this narrative, stems not from warmth but from consistency. Those familiar with her public record note that she has previously clashed with palace PR strategies she viewed as performative. From that perspective, her alleged decision to speak, if accurately reported, may reflect frustration not with individuals, but with what she saw as narrative distortion overtaking risk assessment. This interpretation does not require belief in every allegation to be persuasive. Meanwhile, Marcus Anderson's public silence became a story in itself. In celebrity ecosystems, silence is often read as strategy rather than absence. Anderson's long-standing role within Soho House, a network that has included politicians, tech executives, artists, and royals, placed him at the center of debates about soft power and cultural diplomacy, even as he maintained a low public profile. No wrongdoing has been proven. No formal accusations have been made. Yet influence does not require illegality to matter. If this distinction resonates, save this analysis, because it is key to understanding modern elite networks. Internationally, the story intersected with broader scrutiny of Gulf soft power efforts in Western institutions. From sports ownership to art sponsorships to university endowments, the use of cultural access as geopolitical leverage is now widely documented. Analysts argue that the alleged dossier fits into this pattern, not as an outlier, but as a case study. That does not make any individual culpable. It does, however, raise uncomfortable questions about vetting, disclosure, and transparency at the highest levels of public life. By mid-2026, public opinion remained deeply split. Polling suggested that belief in the narrative correlated less with evidence and more with prior attitudes toward the monarchy, celebrity activism, and institutional authority. In other words, people were not evaluating facts, they were defending identities. This polarization may be the story's most enduring consequence. If you want the next continuation examining how this controversy reshapes trust in institutions beyond the royal family, media, intelligence, philanthropy, make sure you're following, because the implications extend far beyond Windsor. Ultimately, the alleged dossier functions less as a document than as a symbol. To critics, it represents buried truth. To supporters, weaponized insinuation.